Hello! Welcome to our spooky Sunday story. My name is Laura and I'm one of the hosts at Seaside Shadows. And I'm going to tell you an interesting local legend. It has its origins in the UK, which some of you may know that's actually where I previously resided. So this has somewhat close to my heart story, but I should give you a bit of background before I start. So, the story I'm about to tell you is the story of the Black Dog of the Hanging Hills. Now this story is quite intriguing because it's something that still actually happens to this day. Now, its origins are actually in England mostly, although it is sometimes told in Scotland and Wales, and it's the figure of the black dog as some sort of specter, sometimes a demon, but they're not always that bad, as you will find out in this case in Meriden. Now, in England, it's said that there is a black dog that appears in different areas of the countryside. Sometimes it's seen as foreboding of death. Sometimes it's seen as a good omen. Sometimes they can actually protect you from highwaymen or robbers. A black dog will appear out of nowhere and will continue on your journey with you until you get out of a dangerous area. Sometimes they appear in churchyards. Sometimes they're seen at the site of executions. But in this particular case, this is something entirely different. Now, it does seem to have its origins in the stories such as England, but it has a bit of a unique twist. Now, our story begins in the 19th century in Meriden at a place called the Hanging Hills. That sounds a bit ominous, but the Hanging Hills actually refers to the geological formations because the Hanging Hills are actually former volcanoes. It's actually the lava formation that causes these strange overhangs, which is why they're the Hanging Hills. Now, I have to mention the geological part of this because this actually has something to do with our story. Now, our story begins the late 1800s, and I actually have with me an excerpt from the story that was told in a newspaper at that time that was widely reported across the United States. Now, this comes from something called the Connecticut Quarterly, and it was published in the April-June edition of 1898. And this was written by a man named W.H.C. Pynchon. Now, Mr. Pynchon was part of the Geological Survey team for the United States, and he had been sent to Meriden to look at these beautiful formations. But little did he know the legend of the Black Dog of the Hanging Hills. I'll begin reading his statement. He writes, "There is one tale that is especially to be mentioned, the story of a black dog that is seen at times upon the peak. Many have seen him once, a few twice. None have ever told of the third meeting. It is a short-haired black dog of moderate size, with nothing particularly noticeable in its actual appearance. Yet there are two signs by which it is ever known. Men have seen it bark, but have heard no sound. It leaves no footprint behind it in the dust of summer or the snow of winter. Yes, there is a third sign. It is told in different words by different people, but the meaning is always the same. The words with which I have begun this narration are my own rendering of the common tradition. It may seem strange that a man of science should believe a thing of this kind. An idle tale for the ignorant and superstitious, you will say, but I do believe it." Now, this was written as an account of what was witnessed by this man when he was doing his survey. And he had written to a paper and said, "Would you be interested if I do a dramatic retelling?" Now, you may think, oh, interesting, it's starting out as a legend. I don't think you'll believe what happens at the end, for there are serious implications of this legend. He continues on to say that he was looking at these formations, nothing out of the ordinary, saying, "I have been on my knees, pounding away for dear life in my endeavor to get off a good cabinet specimen, and had just gotten up to straighten my back, when I noticed trotting up the road a dog. I suppose he might have been called black, but it was the same degree of blackness that you would see in an old black hat that had been soaked in the rain a good many times." So it appears that this dog is smaller, almost like a spaniel with a bit of scruffy fur. A lot of people tend to think that these black dog specters are large, ominous beings with glowing red eyes, But every time I have heard an account of this dog, it seems to be that it's a sweet, well-natured, spaniel-type dog who seems actually quite eager for human companionship. Now he continues on to describe this dog and why it seems to be a bit more unusual than others. But at the time, he didn't seem to question it. This is the 19th century. Spooky things happened a lot back then. Not once in all that day did I hear him bark, even when a calf beside the road tried to coax him into a fight. And he was so light of foot, through the roads were very dry, yet I did not see a puff of dust rise from his feet as he trotted along ahead of the horse. Now at this point he mentions that this dog follows him down the road as he's going to stay at a local tavern. Now as he goes down the road, the dog eventually disappears ahead of him, and he said he was actually quite upset to see this dog leave. Now he forgets this after a while. He actually moves on to a different place, and he only comes back 3 years later. But this time he's not alone. He has a witness to the black dog. He continues to say, "The evening of February 5th, in the 3rd year after my first visit, found me and my friend Herbert Marshall sitting again before the fire at the hotel where I had stopped before. It was then I heard for the first time the story of the black dog. He had told me how he himself had twice seen a black dog upon the mountain, but he laughed at the legend, saying that he did not believe in omens unless they were lucky ones." Now at this point, you should know what the problem is with this black dog. It seems like a sweet thing, wandering around, having companionship with different travelers. But the reason that he is concerned with the omens is because it is said that when you see this black dog once, it will be for joy. If you see the black dog twice, it will be for sorrow. But no one will live to tell the tale of seeing the black dog for the 3rd time. Now Herbert Marshall laughed at all of this. However, Pynchon was a bit more superstitious. He took it a bit more seriously, but Marshall thought, you know, it's just a local legend from those wacky people in Connecticut. We'll just ignore it, even though he had already seen the black dog twice. They decide to go on an adventure, going into the park, looking at those formations again. And he describes what happened when he went with Marshall into these formations. "Marshall was in the lead. I was following as best I could, when he suddenly stopped and without a word pointed to the top of the cliff. There, high on the rocks above us, stood a black dog like the one I'd seen 3 years before, except that he looked jet black against the snow wreath above him. As we looked, he raised his head and we saw his breath rise steaming from his jaws, but no sound came through the biting air. Once, and only once, he gazed down upon us with gleaming eyes, and he bounded back out of sight. I looked at Marshall, and his face was white, and he steadied himself against a rock. But there was not a tremor in his voice when he said, 'I did not believe it before. I believe it now. This is the 3rd time.' And then, even as he spoke, the fragment of rock on which he stood slipped. There was a cry, a rattle of other fragments falling, and then I stood alone." Herbert Marshall fell from that cliff right after he saw the black dog. Now by the time that the police reached the body, it was reported, "By the body watched a black dog that as they approached fled swiftly back into the shadows, and of the lonely ravine where the brave life ended." Now this was the tale of Herbert Marshall. You can read it in a number of magazines in Connecticut as well as across the state. Now you may think this is just a strange coincidence. It could be that he simply saw a black dog and that Pynchon saw him twice. And if you do notice, he saw him twice. Once for joy, twice for sorrow. He had the sorrow of seeing his best friend fall to his death after seeing the black dog for the 3rd time. Now, this is not where our story ends. You may think that this is something fanciful, something that happens only once in a lifetime. Here in my hands I have a report from the New York Herald, right before 1900. It reads the following. The body of a U.S. geological surveyor was found on West Peak near Meriden, Connecticut yesterday. He disappeared on November 2nd, and all search for him has proved unavailing until yesterday, when his body was found at the foot of the southern cliff of the peak. Apparently, he had fallen from the top a distance of some 40 feet. It was a singular fact that the body was found on almost the identical spot where his friend, Herbert Marshall, met his death 6 years before. This makes the 5th man who has lost his life on the range within 30 years. And so ends the story of W.H.C. Pynchon, for he met the same fate as his friend after seeing the black dog for the 3rd time. Now, friends, you may not have anything to fear. For the last time this happened, it was in 1972, where a wayward hiker seemed to have lost his balance while on top of a cliff. He had joked with his friends that he had seen the black dog twice before, but again, those crazy Connecticut people, we don't believe their legends. So if you believe in the black dog, I would suggest avoiding the hanging hills as much as possible. Or perhaps you're feeling brave and you wish to go seek him out yourself. Look for that bouncing spaniel down the road, the one trotting merrily, the one barking but no sound comes out, the one that does not leave any footprints. I hope that you enjoy my spooky story. I hope that you may take some comfort in this fanciful tale of the black dog. Or is it? It would be up for you to decide. I know that we are stuck at home right now in this quarantine, but I have seen many people going out, taking hikes, going back into nature. It might be good for you to do the same. It might not be. It depends on how many times you have seen the black dog of the hanging hills. I hope you enjoyed my story for tonight. That is all I have. And I hope you continue to tune in on our Spooky Sundays at 8 o'clock. We are always live streaming fun stories about our local history and perhaps abroad. Thank you very much.